everyone? Welcome to Strictly Sports. I am Jacob Brown. Today, we are doing our NHL Eastern Conference playoff preview. The way we're going to do it, we're going to look at the proposed playoff format that was actually just released last night, early this morning, a proposed NHL playoff format that might work out. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the teams just on the outside of the 1v8, and then we'll talk about each individual playoff matchup. Today, I'm joined by both CJ and Steven. I've been doing just basketball with CJ and just baseball with Steven, and now it's all three of us again for hockey. So how you doing, guys?
I'm doing good. I'm doing my best to stay sane during all this, but waiting for some concrete sports updates regarding NHL and the NBA. Other than that, just reading up on draft stuff.
Yeah, doing good. Hanging in there and just doing everything I can to, like CJ said, stay sane and getting some good news here with some NHL. Hopefully trying to get their playoffs started, and NBA trying to salvage their season, and MLB every sports league trying to do something to get them back to some normalcy here. But doing good.
Yeah, for sure. And why don't you tell us about that playoff format?
Yeah, so I was just reading an article this morning, and Gary Bettman had released a proposed format for the NHL playoffs if they were to salvage it. So they've go to two remote locations, one in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and one in a remote location in New Hampshire. City hasn't been disclosed, but basically the top two teams of each division are in. So Boston, Tampa Bay, Washington, Philly, St. Louis, Colorado, Vegas, Edmonton, all clinched. Then the odd teams out, too close to determine solid, like second, third seeds would play a 4-day tournament. First night would be the third and fourth place teams. Toronto, Florida, Pittsburgh, Carolina in the East. Winners are in the third seed. Losers move on to the third and fourth nights where they play other teams, the Islanders, Blue Jackets. Winners of those are in the playoffs. Last spot, losers obviously are done. Same thing happens in the West. Just filter it out. We can go down and break that down as we go through the matchups, but definitely a good way to keep some teams that are on the bubble looking to think, maybe they weren't going to make it if the season gets cut off. But I like the format, and it's something different for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like it a lot. At least it's not as cockamamie as that baseball proposed idea that I saw the other day. They're planning on just throwing everyone in Arizona for 4.5 months and saying, hey, just leave your families for 4.5 months and be isolated in a hotel room. They're saying that players might have to sit in the stands. It's not baseball, and I just don't see why they're doing that in baseball. But this is not a baseball pod today. We're talking about hockey. So let's talk about these 9 through 11 seeds. Right now, the 9 through 11, the New York Islanders are in the 9 seed. They've played 68 games. They have 80 points, 35, 23, and 10. The number 10 seed, the New York Rangers, I'll just be honest, I'm a New York Ranger fan. They're 37, 28, and 5 in 70 games with 79 points. And then the 11 seed, CJ Uri is a Florida Panthers fan. They have played 69 games. They are 35, 26, and 8. So let's start with those Florida Panthers. So I guess in this proposed format, if it does happen, the Panthers would get a shot to play. CJ, you know the most about the Panthers. How would you look at them going into a game like that?
So before the season ended, the Panthers were playing some great hockey, and they had beaten the Blues. They'd beaten a plethora of actual playoff teams, and they started to buckle down. And this was a couple weeks after they traded away hometown favorite Vincent Trocheck. But the thing is that what the league I know right now is having to take into account is who was actually hot and who was probably going to get in. And I really think the Panthers who were on a 3 or 4 game win streak, who were coming down the stretch really hot right now, we're going to probably get in. And the reason why is because of Chris Driedger. Chris Driedger was going to be that guy who was a really good story down the stretch of the season. This is a guy that was in the minors and different leagues a year ago, and he comes up through the Panthers as a backup, and he is playing lights-out goaltending. Much, much, much better than Sergei Bobrovsky. The Panthers deserve every shot at getting into the postseason, and I think that this proposed format is the best way to go about this. But when we look at the Panthers roster, they've got one of the best rosters really in the league offensively. defensively they're a little bit of a mess, but Chris Driedger, they play much more inspired hockey in front of him, and they slack off in front of Sergei Bobrovsky. So, I'm all for this playoff format. Just give every team a shot that was going to make it in. That was a point or two off the pace. But I just would not be wanting to play this Florida Panthers team right now, who are very healthy, who Barkov has gotten 4 weeks of rest at this point, who was a little banged up. And this is a team that is hungry to get in the postseason and make a run. And if they're playing this hockey in front of Chris Driedger, they're just as good as any team in the league. So, that's the outlook on the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget this, though, CJ. I mean, you went on a pretty epic Florida Panthers rant at the deadline when they didn't get a D-man. Do you think that hampers them in the playoffs?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I wish they would have added a stay-at-home D, bigger body, someone that was clear in the crease, a little bit more physical presence on right in front of that net. But the thing is they're starting to play that way in front of Chris Driedger. Part of me feels like these defensemen kind of slacked off in front of Sergei Bobrovsky just because Sergei Bobrovsky can make circus saves and keep you in the game, which, I understand that mindset, but holy cow, you can't leave Sergei Bobrovsky out to dry. No goalie in today's league is going to stop, more than 35 shots consistently a night. I mean, it's just not fair. So the thing is if they're going to play this defense in front of Chris Driedger, they didn't need to add a defenseman. That's how good they've been playing. And you guys both know how much I really dislike this defense group. And the way that they are playing in front of Chris Driedger just shows that they actually have it in them when they want to buckle down. And classic Florida Panthers, when their back is against the wall, let's rattle off 3 or 4 straight wins against playoff teams and get you back on the hook. But if they're included in this playoff format, then whoever is matched up against them is going to be like, well, this stinks. I'd rather play Columbus. No offense to your Rangers, I'd probably rather play a Rangers. So we'll see what happens, but. Yeah, not getting a stay-at-home D really aggravated me at the trade deadline and definitely halted their progress. But I think that right before the season ended, because of coronavirus, I feel like they were on track.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up that point about the Rangers, and we'll get into them now. They're at the 10 seed. I think that they would have had a chance at making the playoffs. I'm not going to be a Homer fan here and just say that they were going to make the playoffs because I'm a Ranger fan. I think it would have been on the fence. They have a young goaltender, Igor Shesterkin, who's taking over New York City with his ability at goaltender. He's been, quite frankly, a phenom rookie goaltender so far, and he's been fantastic. But Chris Kreider went down with a broken foot. The Rangers started to struggle. He would obviously be back for a potential playoff format, but the Rangers would not even be in this potential format. So it's almost a waste of time to just say, oh, well, would the Rangers have made it if they had a healthy Kreider and a healthy Igor Shesterkin? With superstars Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. I mean, those two, it might be one of the best duos in hockey, period. I mean, I look at Stamkos Kucherov, Ovechkin Backstrom, Crosby Malkin, McDavid Draisaitl, and I think Panarin Zibanejad, they're just as good as those duos in the league. I think the Rangers are definitely a playoff team next year, but it would have definitely been on the fence for this year. But then you look at the New York Islanders, the team ahead of the Rangers, who I would actually say the Rangers are better than the Islanders are, considering head-to-head the Rangers have been better this year. What are your guys' thoughts on the Islanders, Steven?
I think offensively they're not as deadly as the Rangers. You can look at the top scorers for New York, the Rangers on that side. Panarin has 95 points, Zibanejad 75. Strome's having a quietly good year.
And by the way, Zibanejad was out for 13 games too.
Exactly. So they were saying him for Hart, but I'm like, he's missed too many games, but 57 games played, having 41 goals. I mean, pretty impressive stuff. And then Strome's had a quietly good year with 18 goals and 59 points. So I look at the two and compare them. Yeah, the Islanders have been carried by, great goaltending play by Thomas Greiss and that 1-2 duo they have over there. But going head to head, I've watched a couple of games when the Islanders and Rangers went and played, and they just were overwhelmed by the Rangers' ability to go 1 through 3 in those lines and just matching up and can score way more goals than the Islanders. And so I think that gives them an edge in that department. So I think to leave the Rangers out of the playoff mix is kind of wrong. They're too close to not have some sort of playoff implications. But I like this Rangers team, and going forward, if they don't make it this year, if there's no season, definitely some glimmer of hope for next year. I mean, yeah, Panarin and Zibanejad coming back for a whole year. I like the young guy Brendan Lemieux, very tough left
Yeah,
winger,
he's nice.
and some good goaltending play you've gotten down the stretch from. So definitely some good things to look forward to for next year.
For sure, for sure. And now let's get into it, guys. The 1v8 matchup right now, it would be the Columbus Blue Jackets, the number 8 seed in 70 games. They were 33, 22, and 15 with 81 points. And I did a little statistical breakdown here. So there's this new stat called SRS, which is the simple rating system, which is a statistic on Hockey Reference. It's an advanced hockey stat. Basically, an average of 0, it means you're an average team. Anything higher than that, that's the higher above average that you are. So the Columbus Blue Jackets on that range, they're a negative. They are a negative 0.12, which means they're a below average team in the NHL making the playoffs. And their strength of schedule is also below average. On the power play, they scored 16.4% of the time, and they killed off 81.5% of their penalties, a goal differential of 7. The big problem with the Columbus Blue Jackets team is injuries. They've lost Josh Anderson, Brandon Dubinsky, Seth Jones, Cam Atkinson, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Kukan, Texier, Gerby. All of these guys have been lost to injuries, so they've had to rely on a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois, who leads the team in scoring with 18 goals and 31 assists. When you look at this team, they're going to be facing the number 1 seed, the Boston Bruins. The Bruins were 44, 14, and 12. They had a SRS of 0.74, which means they're well above league average. They had David Pastrnak going on an incredible run. He had 48 goals and 47 assists before the season stopped. Brad Marchand with 28 goals, 59 assists. Patrice Bergeron, 31 goals, 25 assists. And then Tuukka Rask leading the way at goaltender, as always, with a .929 save percentage and a .212 goals against average. So, guys, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious here. The Boston Bruins are a heavy favorite in this series, and they'd most likely either sweep or win in 5.
Yeah, the Boston Bruins. I mean, the Boston Bruins, obviously, class of the league. They're in that tier 1 spot with maybe 1 or 2 other teams. I would say like the St. Louis Blues, Washington Capitals, Tampa Bay Lightning, Colorado. There's top 5 teams in the league, but Boston is the class of the league right now with 100 points. The only team in the league to have triple digits through the 70-71 game mark. The thing about the Columbus Blue Jackets is they play a very similar style hockey to the New York Islanders. The New York Islanders and the Columbus Blue Jackets, they don't really have the Blue Jackets last year, I guess, had that flashy forward in Panarin, who's no longer there. So the Blue Jackets, they're not good offensively. They're a team that's going to grind you out along the boards. They're not going to take any crap in front of the net. They're going to win in the physical game. They're going to win in the hitting game, and they're going to play a lot of stay-at-home defense. And they're not going to get too risky jumping up in the play because they don't want to be exposed by a Pastrnak, a Marchand, a Patrice Bergeron, and rightfully so. But the thing is, the Boston Bruins were way too good. Last year, the Blue Jackets played the Bruins, pushed them to 6 games. That's when they had a healthy Sergei Bobrovsky who was playing out of his mind. They had Artemi Panarin. The list goes on. I like the Bruins in this series in 5 games. I don't really like sweeps in the NHL. They're very rare, no matter what your seed is. So I like the Bruins in 5 in this series.
What about you, Steven?
Yeah, I'd agree 5. You could potentially push it to 6 if you were to steal one in Boston early, play the perfect game over there. But Boston being 22-4-9 at home this year, very tough to get a win over there in the Garden. But looking at the Bruins team, like 1 through 4, their lines they're just too deep. You got Torrey Krug, David Krejci, and Pastrnak. That first power play line, that unit is just too good. Pastrnak with 20 power play goals. So the second you get shorthanded with Boston, you start trying to play their style of game. That's when they come and hurt you. And just looking at this Columbus Blue Jackets team, like CJ said, they play a very defensive game. So they're not going and scoring 3-4 goals a game. They're banking off of playing solid at blue line, sticking to their game, playing physical, trying to knock Boston and whoever's more talented than them off their game. So I look at it, definitely a team that you can't sleep on because they will be getting, they said, Seth Jones, Alexander Texier, Bjorkstrand, those guys are all coming back if the season were to resume.
Okay.
So I look at this Blue Jackets team, and I take it with a grain of salt right now. If they come back, you get those guys back, you get Jones back on the blue line. Potentially, you could see a different team, and then obviously you had Elvis Merzlikins. He was lights out for a stretch
Yeah,
there, and
Elvis Merzlikins
the
is
last four,
legit. He's good. Like, I'm not gonna
yeah,
lie, he is good.
the last 4 games, I believe they lost 3 out of 4, but they got points out of it just because they were so beat up. I mean, the guy was standing on his head, giving up 2 goals a game. But if they get the season rolling again, watch out for the Blue Jackets potentially winning, a couple games in the road, because I think Mercedes can definitely steal a game or two in that
For
series.
sure. I mean, I think you pointed it out. I mean, it's just the goal scoring. I mean, Boston, when they get on the power play, they score 25% of the time. That's 1 out of every 4 times they score a power play goal, whereas Columbus is 16.4% on the power play. So that's way too big of a difference in my estimation. But is it just me, guys? I mean, have we seen so many young goalies come up this year? I mean, you have Merzlikins in Columbus. You have the guy in Florida. You have Igor Shesterkin with the Rangers. You have Jacob Markstrom with Vancouver last year. You have the Pittsburgh Tyson Jerry coming up and outplaying Matt Murray. There's just a lot of young goaltenders coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say they're young. Jakob Markstrom was actually drafted by the Panthers a while back. It just takes a while for these goalies to really hit their stride. So that's why a lot of people, when you talk about a goalie, their prime doesn't really hit until they're around 30, 29, 30, 31, and then they have some real success because it takes a long time. Goalies are like a fine wine. It's like the one position in sports you just can't you can't really rely on them before they're like in their later 20s or mid to late 20s. Yeah, Jakob Markstrom, Chris Driedger, these are guys that are around the age of 30 now, 31 years old, but they're young in this league. They're not veterans. They're inexperienced goalies. And yeah, I'd like to see Jakob Markstrom actually play some good hockey in Vancouver. He used to be the number one prospect in the entire league at goalie, and it just didn't work out. It just you're a product of your environment at goalie. No matter how talented you are, it doesn't matter unless your team is actually supporting you. And these goalies have definitely been very, very, very lucky to be in the right system. I like Columbus's defense. They've played some unbelievable defense around Elvis Merzlikins, who everyone was writing off for a while, especially after they lost Bobrovsky. So I agree with that. These newer named goalies in the NHL have been a really nice story, and they've kind of screwed up things for goalies that are going to be entering a free agency period that want a big payday, because a lot of teams are going to say, well, yeah, you're lights out, but there's a guy below you that if we play the right defense in front of can be just as effective as you. So yeah, it's definitely been a really good story to watch.
100.
Look at Jordan Binnington too
Right.
last year too. That was first year in the NHL, and he was lights out. I mean, he was on the cusp of getting sent back down to the East Coast League, and look at him now. He got the big payday last summer after the Cup, and it's just crazy to see now.
Yeah, I mean, it's really great to see all these young goalies. All right, guys.
Yeah, real quick correction. I did say that Chris Driedger and Jakob Markstrom are around the 30 age mark. It's just Jakob Markstrom. Chris Driedger is actually pretty young. He's 25 going on 26 soon. Still what I said, it takes mid 20s to late 20s for goalies to really start hitting their stride, and he's definitely ahead of the curve. So good for him, and good for all these new name goalies in the league who are definitely going to be receiving paydays when it's all said and done.
So now we're moving on to the 2v7 matchup in the Eastern Conference. It would be between the number 2 seed Tampa Bay Lightning and the number 7 seed Toronto Maple Leafs. So that would be an in-division matchup. We'll look at the Maple Leafs first, another team that maybe should or should not be a playoff team, but we'll look at them. They were 36, 25, and 9 on the season. They were 23% on the power play, 77.7% on the PK, which is not that great. A goal differential of plus 11. Their SRS was 0.15, so barely above league average. Austin Matthews played 47 games with he had 47 goals and 33 assists in 70 games. Mitch Marner in 59 games had 16 goals, 51 assists. Tavares had 26 goals and 34 assists in 63 games. Nylander also contributing with 31 goals. And then Frederik Andersen in net with a 900 save percentage and a 285 GAA. And then you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, they were 43, 21, and 6 with a 23% power play, 81% on the PK with a goal differential of plus 50, which is crazy, an SRS of .71, and a strength of schedule of 0. Of course, Nikita Kucherov led the way offensively, 33 goals, 52 assists. Stamkos, before he got injured in 57 games, had 29 goals, 37 assists. Braden Point, 25 goals, 39 assists. Hedman leading the way on the defensive side, and then Andrei Vasilevsky with a .917 save percentage, .256 goals against. And this team can score goals. Steven, you know best. You're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan. Let's just talk about the Lightning. What do you think about them in this matchup?
I like them. I mean, going into this, the end of the season, they were playing great hockey. Definitely a frustrating first half of the year. They're finding out ways to win. Got some additions, got some contributions from the third, fourth line. Patrick Maroon started to pick up some heat. Anthony Cirelli, who I really love on that third line. He's a dog. He's 16 goals, 28 assists, 44 points, Selke candidate. But I think this is one of the most complete teams I've seen. I mean, I've said that in previous years, and they go into the playoffs and can't get it done. Obviously, last year, such a disappointing end of the season. But the guys they went and they got Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow from the Sharks, really sold out this season, gave up 2 first-rounders to get these guys, and guys were just pitching in left and right. Alex Killorn having a career year at 49 points and 26 goals. Andre Palat, guys you just don't even think of hearing about day in and day out on these other teams. But I look at them 1 through 4, those lines, and just they can really match up with anyone. They found out how to play physical hockey, like they were missing last year. Columbus really pushed them around, and they were fun to watch. And doing it without guys like McDonough, Jan Ruda, Stamkos is out there for the last 6-7 games. So definitely a team that I was looking forward to seeing in the playoffs. Different MO this year, but Vasilevsky still carrying his weight, 35 wins this year. He found his game after about the second half of the season. But matched up against Toronto, some people say it's not a great matchup because they play such a similar style of hockey. But I look at the defensive pairings. You have Victor Hedman, arguably one of the best defensemen in the league, up against their best D-man, Tyson Barrie, and Morgan Riley. I just think going down the list of defensemen the Lightning have, I think they can really solidify that blue line, clear guys out of the front, and just they can overwhelm Toronto if they really wanted to lock down defensively. And there are top 4, and their top 4 could really just they can go at it. But I think with Kucherov and Stamkos, it gives them an edge. But being a little biased there, but
I don't think this is much of a series, if I'm being honest here.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think. I mean, look, if you want to count offense and whatnot, yeah, they might be pretty much evenly matched on offense in terms of playmakers. But if you look at defense and goaltending, the Lightning have the clear upper hand on them. 2 out of 2 of those things. And the thing is the Maple Leafs are playing horrific hockey this year. The contracts that they're giving out, there's a lot of drama. Mike Babcock fired. I don't think they've regained any sort of form. I mean, the second that they pull away from the Panthers, they stumble and let the Panthers come back. They're not a good team on the road. The fans are really harsh on the team. I don't really think the Maple Leafs get out of the series past 6 games. I don't think it goes to a Game 7. I think it could end 4-1. I think I'll say 4-2, but I think the Lightning are a much better coach team, a much better hockey team all around. They play with teamwork, not a lot of drama there. I think this is a 6-game series, Lightning go on in the second round.
I'm totally with you, CJ. I mean, this Lightning team is substantially better than Toronto for everything you just said. I mean, you look at that defense, you look at the goaltending, it's a clear advantage for Tampa Bay. And you could say all you want, that big 4 for Toronto, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, and Nylander, yeah, that might be better than the Lightning's offense, but not by much. Kucherov, Stamkos, and Point as a big 3 is probably just as productive, if not possibly better, than that Toronto big 4. And then, of course, the defense for Tampa. You have Victor Hedman with 11 goals and 44 assists. You have Sergachev, Shattenkirk, Ryan McDonough. These guys are true defensemen. They can move the puck. They could defend incredibly well. They're elite defenders. Multiple guys on Team USA, on Olympic teams on this defense. I really think the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to win this series. And this is tough for me to say. I mean, I've said it repeatedly to you, Steven. I mean, this is the Tampa Bay Lightning team that ruined my childhood when I was 16, and the Rangers got shut out 2 games in a row in the 2016 playoffs and lost. But this Lightning team, you can't deny it. They are better than the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and I look at the thing I look at is 5-on-5 play. The last 2 times the Lightning and Maple Leafs have played, they've gotten this last couple matchups, but in those two games, they have scored 6 power play goals. They had the power play 12 times in the last two matchups. Lightning have had two power play opportunities. We scored 5-on-5 goals there. So in the playoffs, too, you look at how many times you can really be on the man advantage. Not a whole lot. So you really have to bear down on 5-on-5 play, and that's where I think the Lightning can get them in that offensive side. They can score all they want on the power play, but if you match up just 5-on-5, your guys against ours, boom, go. I think they outman them, out physical them, and just like I said, CJ said, I think they end up winning the series, but it'll be a lot closer than people think just because they do play a similar style. But this Lightning team, you just never know in the playoffs. They give me too much stress year in and year out. So
I mean, you could argue. I mean, for sure. I mean, we could talk about that too with this team. This is a team that probably should have won a Stanley Cup by now. John Cooper, very debatable job as head coach of this team. Steven, you
He's
watch them
on
the
the hot
most.
seat.
Yeah, if they lose a playoff, if they don't go to the Stanley Cup, now let's say they just play this playoff format the way it is. If they don't make the Stanley Cup, is Cooper gone?
if they make it to the Cup final, then he's there. But if they don't this year, it's too hard because the season's such a wash. I mean, everyone wanted him out mid of the season. They were like, "Oh, he's done. We need a culture change." I think he's done a great job. I mean, you could have asked for more wins. Yes, he hasn't gotten delivered and made a Stanley Cup, won a Stanley Cup, I should say. But if it doesn't work out this year, if they end up playing, I don't think you can give him the boot because it's been such a mess. If you don't have a traditional format, then no. But I don't know. It's frustrating. I've had my ups and downs with it, but I couldn't ask for more from him as a head coach. But I think if they don't make it this year, you give them one more year, and that's it. That's the bottom line.
All right, so we'll see what happens with John Cooper, but let's move on to this 3v6 matchup. It would be between the number 3 seed Washington Capitals and the number 6 seed Carolina Hurricanes. The Hurricanes are 38, 25, and 5. They're 22% on the power play, 84% on the PK, a goal differential of plus 29. I was saying months ago, this is a Hurricanes team that a few months ago, they were always on the outside looking in the playoffs, and I was always looking at that goal differential saying that's a playoff team. They're going to make it. You look at this team, Sebastian Aho, the clear leader of this offense, 38 goals, 28 assists. He's with Teravainen, 15 goals, 48 assists. Svechnikov, 24 goals, 37 assists. Dougie Hamilton on the defensive side with 14 goals, 26 assists. They have some young players like Nikas, Slavin on defense with 36 points. But the goaltending is where the problem is with Carolina. They can't figure out who their goalie is. We'll get to that in a second. And then on the 3 seed, the Washington Capitals, they're 41, 20, and 8. They are 19% on the power play, which is actually kind of shocking because, Alex Ovechkin, they have an 82.5 PK rate, and they have a goal differential of plus 25. Now, this may shock some people, but John Carlson is currently their team leader in points over Alex Ovechkin with 15 goals and 60 assists. Ovechkin with 48 goals and 19 assists. And then, of course, Backstrom still in there with the assists with 42 of them. And then they have a collection of role players with Jacob Vrana, Evgeny Kuznetsov, TJ Oshie, Tom Wilson, Dmitry Orlov. But them too, goaltending might be a problem. Braden Holtby struggling this season with an .897 save percentage, a .311 goals against average. And then Samsonov, another young goalie, 22 years old, coming in for the Caps, .913 save percentage, .255 goals against average. What are your guys' views on this? We'll start with CJ. We'll go with what are your views on the Washington Capitals?
I like the Washington Capitals a lot. I like them as a team to make a deep run. The reason why is because they play very physical hockey and they're fast. And they're also a team that people aren't talking like they were, in the NHL. When you're hot, people talk about you. But the thing about the Capitals is they've just been so consistent this year. They've been consistently holding down their number 1, number 2 spot in their division, and up until the Flyers really came on this year, they later in the season, the Capitals really had a firm grip on the division. They just played very consistent physical hockey. Alex Ovechkin still is just top tier scorer in the league, regardless of age. Love Nicholas Backstrom. I love they're a deep team. You don't really hear much about the guys on the bottom 6, but they all play a role every game. I like them a lot to get at the very least to round 2, and then after that, you really don't know what's going to happen. But they're a team that if they ran all the way to made a run all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, I would not at all be surprised. Braden Holtby playing great hockey, so they're just a model of consistency, and you can never forget about TJ Oshie. Who's their grinder that they have that everyone hates?
Tom Wilson.
Tom Wilson. I mean, that guy
Wilson.
comes alive in the playoffs. No one really has an answer for him. So, I would love to see a playoff series of the Boston Bruins versus the Washington Capitals. That would be one to watch. But I like the Capitals a lot.
I mean, Steven, we just talked about the goaltenders. Holtby is really struggling here with an under 900 save percentage. Are they going to go to Samsonov instead, do you think?
I think you just got to ride the guy that has won a cup with you. I think now that you've had this layoff, they're gonna go back to Holtby. Maybe he's found his game again mentally. I think he wasn't struggling too mightily. He had some bad bounces, bad breaks in front of him, but the numbers aren't there for him. He still won 25 games this year for him. I think it's led by the scoring of the Capitals, their ability to just go in and score, drop a 5-6 spot on you any given night. But I think you got to ride the guy who's been there, been through that playoff grind, knows how to win a Stanley Cup. That's key. You can have a young goalie, but the second you throw him into that playoff mix, it's just a different game. You got to really bear down, make these key saves and key moments where if you give up a couple softies in a playoff matchup, that's the difference between you moving on and getting eliminated. So I think you got to ride Holtby no matter what the numbers say, just because he's been there and has that experience.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that goaltending situation over there in Washington. But I just look at them, and I'll say a bunch of what you guys have been saying. You got some role players in there that people really don't talk about. The Tom Wilsons, the TJ Oshies, the Kuznetsov, Verana. They're just sitting there, all of them, with 40 to 55 points. They're just sitting there scoring goals, and no one's really talking about them. Of course, you have the duo of Ovechkin-Backstrom. Backstrom still getting in there with 42 assists. Ovechkin with his 48 goals. You have Carlson. He might be one of the best scoring defensemen in the NHL. The fact that he's outscoring Ovechkin is crazy with 15 goals and 60 assists. But they also have Orlov on that D. They have other guys on that defense that are pretty good. And this team won a Stanley Cup 2 years ago. So this is no team to sleep on. They still have a lot of that core from that Cup team. And I think that they can do damage for sure. And now you look at this 6 seed, the Carolina Hurricanes. I think their one huge problem here is goaltending. They have 4 goaltenders. And I don't think they have any idea who they even want to play. They have Mrazek, Reimer, Forsberg, and it's a long name. It's Nedeljkovic. That's my whiff at that name. But what are your guys' views on the Carolina Hurricanes?
Well, they play a great defensive game. Rob Brindamore has got them bought into playing the right way, and they'll go out there and they can play with anyone. They can run a track meet with someone. They can play a 1-0 game and win. That's what we saw last year in the playoffs from them. They went and played the Islanders, grinded that series out, and they eventually got to the Bruins and played some close games and eventually got swept. Just kind of got a little overmatched with that 1-2 lines from Boston. But a team that really, if you overlook them too, it's like I said with the Columbus Blue Jackets, if you overlook them, they can come out and punch you in the face. They got – the scoring on the scoring sheet doesn't really overwhelm you. Sebastian Aho's their leading scorer with 66 points. Teuvo Teravainen, 63 points. Svechnikov, 61 points. Guys, their leading goal scorer, Aho, has 38 goals. So they really are keen on good defense. Sammy Vatanen, Dougie Hamilton, Jacob Slavin, guys that log over 22 minutes a night. So they're really hounding on the fact that their blue line needs to be solid and needs to play in front of their goaltender to win games night in and night out.
Yeah, not even those goaltenders. You have Fleury, not even those defensemen. You have Fleury, Van Riemsdyk, new acquisitions, Brady Shea and Sammy Vatanen. This defense is loaded. What do you think about the Hurricanes, CJ?
I like everything that Steve just said. As an organization, I'm not very convinced by the Carolina Hurricanes. I thought they made some flashy moves at the trade deadline, including adding Vincent Trocheck from my Panthers. I still think that's a great. He's a playoff type center. He's scrappy. He finishes his checks. Great passer of the puck. He's never afraid to shoot. He's got the stats to prove that. I think they've added a lot, but I felt like it was just a lot of additions to the team, and they started to lose after the trade deadline a little bit. They weren't playing the same hockey because I think they needed to find a way to play as a team with their new additions. They lost a few guys, Walmart, Holla. Those are two guys that fans loved. But the thing is that the Carolina Hurricanes are turning into an organization that's going to be in the playoffs pretty much every year because the DNA is starting to be put there. I don't know if I like them getting out of the first round because I feel like I needed to see a little bit more from them down the stretch. And if they were one of those teams that were going to go into the playoffs hot, like winning 7 of their last 10, playing really good hockey, then that was a team that I would really sit there and be like, you know what, they're playing good hockey. But if it weren't for their beginning of the year and mid-year success, they'd be out of a playoff spot because they haven't really been playing good hockey since the trade deadline.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this team, it's more about next year, the year after that, because this is going to be a perennial playoff team. I think they're going to go in there and fight against the Capitals, but at the end of the day, the Capitals are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they have more stars, they've won a cup, they're just the better team. Period. They also have home ice, so and that's a crazy arena to play in playoff time. I mean that place gets really loud, and that's something to really take into account when you're talking NHL playoffs. Crowd factor is huge. Although now that I'm thinking about it, they might play in Vegas and the crowd won't matter to any team. But anyway, the Carolina Hurricanes, listen, they're a team that, as you look at this Eastern Conference, there are some teams in here that have been there every single year that I think over the next few years are going to start to slip, like the Capitals, like the Penguins. They're guys, they're not getting any younger. You have this Hurricane team, you have the Flyers, you have the Rangers, young up-and-coming teams with talent that I think are going to eventually take over that Metro division. So I like Carolina going into next year, the year after that, not as much this year, but they're very talented. Aho, Teravainen, and other guys. I like their team a lot. Also, Nikas, young 21-year-old center. So they have a lot of talent going on there. So now we're going to look at the 4v5 matchup, and this one's interesting. It's going to be a battle of Pennsylvania between the Philadelphia Flyers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the Flyers have completely went off ever since Carter Hart got called up. He's been crazy. We talk about young goaltenders. This is the prime example of one. 21 years old in 43 games, had a .914 save percentage, a .242 goals against average. He's been incredible. You look at that defense with Matt Niskanen, other guys as well. Forgetting the guy's name. Oh, Provorov, also very good. 13 goals, 23 assists, a +11. They have some. See, this is the problem with the Philadelphia Flyers. Their offensive depth is not there, in my opinion. Konechny, Couturier, Voracek, Giroux, as a collective group, maybe they can produce. That's a good group, but they don't have one guy in there that's necessarily a big goal scorer. Giroux is not the guy he used to be. Kevin Hayes, for some reason, getting a lot of love over in Philadelphia, but he only has 23 goals and 18 assists. I don't really see the hype over Kevin Hayes. The Flyers are 41, 21, and 7 on the year, by the way. So they're in the 4 seed. And then you look at the Penguins. This is a team that dealt with injuries with Crosby again. They dealt with injuries with Russ, with Malkin. This is just an old team. That's what happens over time. The Penguins are 40, 23, and 6. Evgeny Malkin in 55 games had 25 goals, 49 assists. Crosby in his 41 games had 16 goals, 31 assists. And then Rust produced with 29 goals in 27 games. 27 goals in 55 games. And then the goaltending situation is also very interesting for Pittsburgh. It's either going to be Matt Murray, who's won a cup, or it's going to be Tristan Jarry, another young goaltender coming up, 24 years old in 33 games, has a .921 save percentage and a .243 goals against. So we'll start with the Pittsburgh Penguins first. CJ, what is your thought process on this Penguins team? Old and has won a bunch of cups.
I've actually sort of liked the way they played this year. They were hanging out in that wild card spot, out of a wild card spot at the beginning of the year. I was like, wow, this team's not playing very good hockey right now through the first 3 months of the season, 3.5 months of the season. But they really came on, towards that coronavirus ending of the year and around the trade deadline. They started to play very good hockey. They were a surefire bet for anyone that was sports betting across the country. They went out to California. They played great hockey in that California road trip. I really thought, I was like, well, you know what? The Penguins, they're kind of back. But the thing is right now in the series, I'm going to give the edge to the Flyers because the Philadelphia Flyers have played such good hockey to the fact that they literally got all the way back up to contending for that number 1 seed or the number one spot in their division when the Capitals had a firm hold on it for the whole season. The Flyers are grinding out games, but they're also scoring a decent amount. And when you get production through your four lines and you have a hot goalie, you got to watch out. And that defense is good. And the Philadelphia Flyers, just like any other Philly team, they are known to play hard-nosed, physical style of their sport. And the Flyers are a team that I wouldn't want to play in the first round. I wouldn't want to play in the second round. Unless I was a Boston Bruins or Washington Capitals where I know I can handle the physicality and dish it back out, they're a matchup nightmare. And I think they're going to beat up on Sidney Crosby. I see this game going 6, maybe 7 because of the rivalry, but I like the Flyers.
Wow, 6 games. What about you, Steven?
I have it going 7. This is a matchup I looked at and I go, if you're a hockey fan, this is one you want to look at and watch because two teams that are really almost evenly matched in both their home records. They both have won 23 games apiece at home. Away, they're 500. So you get that home ice and you get to game 5. It's going to be a battle towards that game 5, game 6 area. But diving into the teams, I like Pittsburgh a lot just because of the veteran guys they got on that team: Malkin, Crosby, Letang, Hornquist. I mean, you go down the list. Dominic Simone, who's coming back off injury, but the top 4 there. I mean, guys who have won multiple cups know how to win come springtime. Know how to grind a 7-game series out. Yes, they're old. They've battled injuries all year. That's why I like them. They've faced a whole lot of adversity, and to be where they're at right now, I give them props. The only problem with the Penguins is their goaltending play. You're going up against, like CJ said, Carter Hart, who is lights out, has won 24 games quietly this year, has been talked about as of late when they were going on that 9-1-0 stretch before we went on this season break. But I look at the depth of the two teams. I think the Penguins can score a lot more goals than Philly. But going into a matchup in the playoffs, it's just going to be such a physical battle where I think it's going to come down to, it's going to be a 1-goal game a night. Who's going to get that late third period goal? It's going to be a fun series to watch. I give the edge to the Penguins just because of the veteran personas they have on that team. But this will be a fun series to watch for sure.
I guess I'm the tiebreaker here. I'm going to go Flyers in 7. I just think at the end of the day, it comes down to goaltending and defense. I think Philadelphia has the advantage in those 2 categories. The biggest thing, though, to me is that people really don't realize Crosby and Malkin are 2 players that are incredibly beat up. They've had a lot of injuries over the years. They're getting into their mid-30s. These guys are not getting younger. I know that they're superstars. I know that they're future Hall of Famers. But you have to look at reality and say these guys are older and they're not who they used to be. And I think after playoff run after playoff run after playoff run, these teams eventually degrade. It happened to the Chicago Blackhawks. It happened to the Los Angeles Kings. It happened to even the Bruins. They went on a few years there where they weren't contending for cups. So when you make perennial cup runs, there's going to be a time where it just stops. And I think this is where it stops. They're going to run into a really hot young goaltender in Carter Hart, really incredible run that he went on. Right when he got there, the Flyers started to take off. And, CJ said they've been scoring goals, but as a team. And that's what I pointed out before. They don't necessarily have that number one star. I mean, Thomas Konechny is their number one goal scorer right now, but they have a collection of guys who are going to work together and play as a team. Alain Vigneault, a really experienced head coach, has come in, kind of established a new philosophy around their style of play where they're still physical and they still bring that Flyers toughness, but they also bring that Alain Vigneault finesse. And that's what he brings as a head coach. I like this Flyers team in 7 games. And that is it for our 4v5 matchup. And I guess that's it for this Eastern Conference playoff pod. I think we've covered all the bases here. We've talked about all the playoff matchups, all the teams on the bubble outside of the Eastern Conference. And it's been really fun, guys. I mean, we've had a great time. And here to announce, this podcast is now on Apple Podcasts. We're really excited to announce that. We just updated our logo. It's on Apple Podcasts now. You can follow us on Twitter at Strict Sports FAU. Again, listen on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and a bunch of other platforms. For CJ Uri and Stephen Cashin, I am Jacob Brown, and we'll see you next time.